if in fact what I'm going to do is to attempt to communicate God to someone who believes in science. So this morning what we're going to talk about is, we're going to talk about something called the scientific method. You may have also heard it termed the scientific process. But for most of you, probably the first time you ever heard this was when you were in junior high and you were in your general science class. And they introduced this method, this process to you as a way of determining things in the scientific world around us. And although over time the method or the process has adapted, and I do want to point out something to you, it's adapted because the old rules weren't working when they were attempting to disprove God and prove things that never existed. So they've kind of changed the rules a little bit, but generally speaking, what I'm about to present to you is what most of us learned in school. Grade school, junior high, high school, for sure. It shouldn't really be the first time you've ever heard of it. It's just that enough time has gone by that you felt like you might never need it. Well, let me suggest that we always need to learn how other people think. If you do not understand Mormonism and you sit down and have a Bible study with them, you're going to have a much harder time understanding what they're saying and attempting to communicate with them if you don't know the lingo. Same thing is true if you want to talk Catholicism with a Catholic, if you want to talk Judaism with a Jew. I one time had a discussion with an elder in the Seventh-day Adventist church. I had a Bible study with him and his wife. His wife actually became a Christian later. He never did, to the best of my knowledge, but he would come to the Bible studies. And I remember one time that he used a term that I thought I understood, but I didn't. The term was commandment. Anybody not understand that term? Well, here's the point. What do Seventh-day Adventists believe? Basically, fundamentally, what's the core teaching? What do they believe? Yeah, they worship on the seventh day. Which is the seventh day? Saturday. Okay? So they believe that what we're doing today is wrong. What we should have done is been worshiping yesterday. And, by the way, by certain Old Testament teachings. But here's the thing. Does the New Testament teach us to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy? Well, the teaching of Judaism was there, but is there a New Testament teaching that teaches us that we are to obey, or that we are to worship God on Saturday and not Sunday? Yes, there is. Yeah, I love that look. Yes, there is. The lady grabs her Bible. Okay, so she's ready. Now, when I say that to you, you've got to be thinking that's not right, and that's the problem. For 3 weeks, I did not believe the New Testament taught that. And then I learned something. Does the New Testament teach we are to obey the commandments of God? Church, does it say it? Yes. What I didn't realize for those first 3 weeks was every time he read in the New Testament the word commandment, he inserted the definition for that to be the Sabbath day. If all these passages of Scripture in the New Testament that tell us we are to obey the commandments of God, if all of that means that we are to worship on Saturday instead of Sunday, then we're doing it wrong. The problem is that's not what it means, but that's what he understood. And every time I said we should obey the commandments of God, he said, of course we should. And I would say, but we shouldn't remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy under the law of Christ. And he said, sure we should. You just pointed out to us that we're to obey the commandments of God. You see, his lingo was not my lingo. Now, all of us need to make sure biblically that we are speaking the Bible's lingo. But I didn't understand him because we were using two different Bibles, in essence. And so this is why we need to understand these things. I want to ask you a very simple point. From here on out, we're probably not even going to use the Bible. And I know that sounds wrong, but that's because this lesson is to help us to understand how to better communicate with those who don't use the Bible by using their Bible, by using science. Can anybody remember what the first step in the scientific process was, the scientific method? Anybody remember that? No goomer, you've seen the PowerPoint, you can't answer. No. This young man said, hypothesize, you're on step 2. So I need number 1. Yes, ma'am. She's younger. Here it goes. Observation. She nailed it. She is closer to a working